Hey there, dream chasers and passion pursuers. Welcome to the Passion2Purpose Podcast, where we celebrate individuals who've turned their passions into thriving businesses, nonprofits, movements, and side hustles. I am your host, Misha Miller, a professional with 20 years in the nonprofit sector, a licensed realtor and mortgage advisor. Here we share inspiring stories, challenges, and strategies to help you transform your dreams into reality. Tune in and discover how you too can turn your passions into purpose. Bernadette Jackson is a distinguished relational wellness strategist, founder, author, and speaker known for her impactful contributions to personal growth and development. While she has graced the TEDx stage with her insightful talk on healing, resilience, emotional intelligence, and authenticity, Bernadette's work extends far beyond public speaking. With a background rooted in overcoming relational trauma, Bernadette brings a wealth of personal experiences to her work, empowering individuals and communities with research-backed insights and practical strategies for fostering mental, emotional, and relational well-being. Her book, Daughter Heal, a call for fatherless daughters to take a fresh look at old wounds, introduces the widely praised HEAL framework, a holistic approach integrating mindfulness, boundary setting, managing difficult emotions, cultivating self-compassion, and building healthy relationships. Hey, Bernadette, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your passionate pursuits with our listeners. I'm excited to get into the interview today and learn more about your journey and how you've come to the work that you're now doing. So we'll get right into the questions if that's okay.
Of course, Misha.
Awesome. Can you tell us about your background and what initially sparked your passion for healing fatherless daughters?
Yes, I can definitely do that. I just wanted to say thank you for allowing me to be on this platform. It is an honor to be here. I love talking about purpose. I love talking about passion. So this is absolutely the place that I would love to have this conversation. So in answer to your question, what sparked it really is an initial conversation with God that I like to call my coming to Jesus moment. It happened several years ago. It was on my birthday. I was spending it alone again. And this time I had thought that I was going to be with the man that I was going to be marrying, but we had broken up about 3 days before that. And I was crying out to God on my birthday. I was sitting alone in my apartment. It was cold. It was dark. And I was just like, Lord, why am I here again? I am a good person. I am lovable. I try to do all the things. I try to accommodate the person I'm with. Why am I always in this position? And he expressly told me that you are the common denominator in all of these failed relationships. And until you do something to change, there is not going to be a change in the results. And honestly, I was like, Lord, you did not have to do me like that. First of all, it's my birthday. You could have eased this in gently. You did not have to just come right out the gate, fist flying. I didn't need all of that. You could have gently sat me down. You could have held my hand. You could have told me this in a much nicer way. But I feel like if he had not told me in that way, that I would not have actually decided that I needed to be radically honest about who I was, how I was showing up, and what the results were of my actions. And so he told me exactly the way I needed to in order to start taking radical action. And that's exactly what I did. Literally the next day, I wanted to get super clear on how I was showing up in relationships, why I was showing up in that way, and what could I start doing differently. And what I started to understand about myself is that my lack of relationship with my father had caused some beliefs that I had that were informing the actions that I was taking in the relationships that I was having. And I wanted to understand, how does fatherlessness show up in women? How might it be different than the way it shows up in men or boys? And I started to take a deep dive into this world of fatherlessness, into behavior analysis, into neurobiology, and all of the things. And at the time, I didn't realize that that's what I was doing. I really just wanted to understand what was going on with me. And in doing that, and it took 3 years, I call this my lab season. I was a mad scientist. I was doing all the things. I was my number one case study. It was a really interesting time. But during that time, I was able to understand how my father's absence had shaped my view of myself and how it had projected into the actions that I was taking in relationships. And doing all of that led me to want to start to do some things differently, to experience some new things. And the Lord really just took me through a healing journey over the course of those 3 years. And at the end of it, I had what I now call my HEAL framework, is what I teach the women that are in my private practice. It is the way in which I allow them to really come to understand themselves and to guide them to self-awareness and all of the things. And really what it did for me was to open my eyes to how I was making my father's absence and his choice about something that I did wrong, something that was about me when really it wasn't. And so just coming to the understanding that it wasn't me, it was him, and how I can now breathe easier, that there isn't anything inherently wrong with me, and that it was a choice that he made. It allowed me to start accepting new things, start wanting new experiences for myself, and essentially the movement that I now have, which is called Daughter Heal.
Awesome. And so that aha moment, I know you had that deep reflection of looking at how you were showing up in relationships and realizing that that was directly traced back to your father. When did you have the moment that you thought, you know what, I've gotten to a place where I'm coming into this healing. How can I help other women? Or I should probably open this up to other women. What was that moment like for you?
Honestly, it wasn't really a moment so much as it was a mandate from the Lord. I wasn't trying to do any of that. I was like, Lord, you healed me. Thank you. I can see what I can start doing differently now. I'm showing up better in relationships. I'm starting to experience what I want to experience and all of that. And he just tapped me on the shoulder and was like, oh, now I need you to do this for my daughters. And I was like, what are you talking about? This is not my thing. Why would you want me to do that? And honestly, it took several conversations, because I used to just tell people what I was discovering about myself. And I was really excited to share what I had learned. And really, it was just like, oh, this is this new focus that I have. I've been really focused on this for the past 3 years. Let me tell you what I discovered about X, Y, and Z. And what started to happen is that people would listen like, wow, I never realized that. And these would be people that I didn't know had their own fractured father relationships. And so I was just telling them what I was doing, what I discovered, the connections that I was making. And then they would come back a week or two later, like, that thing that you told me 2 weeks ago, I tried that with my husband. Do you know that worked? I cannot believe that all this time that I was wrestling with a particular thought or whatever it is, and you just telling me that one thing unlocked a different kind of communication that I now have. So I used to get a lot of people coming to me talking about things like that, just things that I was telling them randomly, stuff that I was excited about, were just coming back with great results. And so the Lord just kept on showing me that kind of reaction that I was getting to the work that I was doing. And in seeing that, and him continuing to put me in spaces where my excitement about speaking about what I was learning for myself was changing the relationships that people were having with their family, with their significant others, with their children, and all of that, it just inspired me to get started. And so I tentatively, put it out there and said, hey, this is what I'm doing. It's a pilot program if you're interested. And I got a few people who were interested, and taking them through the same exact steps that the Lord took me through, and seeing them have 100% turnaround and success rate with what we were doing just gave me the courage to continue doing the work that I was doing. But it really wasn't something that I had initially thought that was going to be my ministry, actually.
Wow. That's kind of awesome how we fall into, well, we don't really fall into it. I think a lot of our purpose, we're looking for this profound thing, right? Like this moment where we're going to have this logical thing that comes into place that is our big purpose in life, when really we've been passionate about certain things, certain behaviors, certain ways of being all of our lives. And then it's that moment where it comes together, and then you realize that, oh, maybe this is my purpose. Maybe I have found it. And it's not always this thing that requires a career change or a life change. Sometimes it's an addition to everything that you're already doing. What would you say are some of the biggest challenges you faced as you're creating this movement and work and walking into serving these other women?
I think one of the biggest challenges that I have seen is women's reluctance to talk about what has happened to them and the feelings that they have as a result of it. What I have come to understand about our community is that we handle things a lot of times in secret and on our own. And so, because of this, we don't feel like anybody else could ever understand what we're going through, or that no one else can help us through it. And a lot of times we actually feel scared or reluctant to ask for the help that we need. And this a lot of times comes from just growing up in environments where we have had to figure things out on our own a lot of the times. Women with fractured father relationships may most of the time have grown up with others who did not remarry. And so when you have that kind of dynamic, a lot of times you and your mom are really just like a team, and y'all are trying to make sure that you make it. And so with that comes, oh, I don't want to put more on my mom than I see she's already doing. If she's working late and she's coming home, I'm not trying to tell her that this is how I feel, because it's just going to add to the burden that I already see she has. And so a lot of times you are your own counsel. You are trying to work out within yourself how to address a situation. A lot of times you're not equipped to handle it. You're not equipped to deal with it. You do not have the emotional capacity or know how to really walk yourself through the emotional trauma that is created with this lack of relationship, but you try. And so because this is your way of dealing with this kind of behavior, with these situations and stuff, you take that into adulthood. It's what you have always been familiar with, so you always handle situations in this way. And so it's been hard for women to step out of the shadow and say, I need assistance. I really do want to know how this has affected me. What I get a lot of times is women who have been silently following me for years before they finally speak up and say, I'm ready. I've been listening to you for the last 3 years now, and I can see where I need the help. And so I get that a lot. And then I also get the other side of it, where for so many decades, women who have had daddy issues or father issues are looked at negatively. They're looked at as the women who have attitudes, the women who don't want to be submissive, the women that you want to stay away from, and all of the things. And so there hasn't really been any compassion from the larger world about what may have happened to cause this woman to be hard, to cause her to not inherently trust you out of the gate, and all of these things. And because there's no curiosity from the people around us about why we came to be the way we are, we just have this negative stigma around who we are, how we're going to show up in relationships and things of that nature. And a lot of times it really just isn't true. And so just trying to redefine how the world views women with these daddy issues has been something that I've tried to do on my platform, while letting the women who I really want to come close and to draw in to know that this is a safe space for them to finally say what has always been on their heart and what they have always wanted to address.
Do you find that, well, I'll just use myself as an example. When you spoke about not wanting to put more on your mother than you can bear, that is so relatable, because that is pretty much, me and my mom were a team, right? And we took care of my younger siblings. But it wasn't even that that was a big reason I didn't want to put more on her, but then I also didn't have the language to say this, to communicate, this is how I feel. I didn't even know what word choices to use. I couldn't even put words on my feelings a lot of times to even get to the place of when I did feel comfortable to verbalize that to my mother. Do you find that the women that come to you lack the language to even express to the level in which they need to express how they feel?
Yes, actually, I do. There's a lot of women who I speak to who, number one, didn't even realize that they would be considered fatherless daughters based on the kind of relationship that they had with their father. And so the one thing that I like to do in my platform and my practice and whatever I'm doing is to define terms. And the first one that I always define is what fatherlessness actually is. And I always explain it as it's on a spectrum of your father being absent to your father being physically there but emotionally unavailable. And every time I say fatherlessness is also your father father being physically present but emotionally unavailable, then things start to click in a lot of women's head, because they didn't realize that, oh no, my father was in the home, but he worked all the time. He was never curious about who I was. We never went out anywhere. He always sat in front of the TV when he got home. Like, that too is fatherlessness. So when we start talking about how that actually looks, what it presents like in relationships, the kinds of thoughts that you may have about yourself, the kinds of inclinations and behaviors that you have and things of that nature because of this fatherlessness, then people start to come into awareness and they start to gain the language around like what has actually happened all this time. And so this is why I try to educate a lot on my platform. The podcast that I did was all about educating women on what behaviors, what their actions, what their thoughts lead to, what it can look like in real time and all of that, so that they can stand and identify within themselves if this is them and this is what they've been experiencing.
Right. That's amazing work, necessary work, and much needed. Because when I think about a lot of myself and other female relationships that I have, if we don't have these conversations on this level, there's illusion to it, right? But we don't have the language to go deep. And so that's where it's important to interact with individuals like yourself and others to help us move that into a place of healing versus just sharing experiences with no real strategies to go further with it, right? Can you share a specific instance where you had to push past your own fears and uncertainty to either enter this work or continue the work?
Yeah, one of the fears that I had to push past is public speaking. That's been something that I have toyed with for a while. I do know that it's necessary for the work that I'm doing, but when I first got the push to start doing public speaking, it was scary because what started to come up was that the same diss track that I used to play over and over and over again in my mind as it relates to my father was that I'm not good enough. No one is going to like me. People are going to laugh. They're not going to receive me well, all of this stuff. And what I had to do for the first speaking engagement that I had to push past that fear was to speak positively over myself. Literally, I had to be in the backstage, affirming myself up and down around the place. Just like I had to really just build myself up, because honestly, I thought that the way that my father had treated me and what I thought about myself because of that was going to translate to how this audience was going to receive me. And so that didn't happen. I was surprised. My brain did get some new information, which is good because now it's not the same kind of fear anymore. But I feel like that was maybe the biggest thing in recent years that I had to push past.
Can you speak a little bit about how important affirmations are in your day-to-day?
Absolutely. I have recently been doing something called a morning manifesto, and it is an affirmation, but really it is just like a charge to myself about what promises do I want to keep to myself, what environment that I want to be in, who I want to surround myself with, who I am, and how I want to show up and what I'm going to accept. And that has been really instrumental in setting the tone for the day. One thing that I have realized about affirmations and the time that you say it and the intention with which you say it is that they can either help you to be in the kind of mind space that you want to be in for the rest of the day, or they can start to derail you. And the best example that I have of this, and this is a neuroscience hack, is in the morning, and you start to think about what is the thing that I am focusing on in the morning. And if I'm focusing on, I'm going to have a bad day, I have so many meetings that I have to go through, it's going to be stressful. Your brain now understands the assignment and is now going to look for all of the stress and all of the bad things to point to, because your brain is always in a place of wanting to prove itself right. So if you have thoughts that are saying that I am not worthy, that I do not accept, that I do not deserve to have the kinds of relationships that I deeply desire, that being in aligned relationships is not something that I should get because my father wasn't around, or any kind of negativity. And this is a diss track that's playing in your head every time you meet someone, every time you go into a new space or whatever it is. Your brain is now going to look for the times where you even felt slightly snubbed. Oh, she looked at me funny because I had tried on this dress. This is probably because I'm not worthy. Oh, this person who I had an okay conversation with, but he wasn't super into me, must think that I'm not worthy, all of the things. And so affirmations really combat the kinds of negative thoughts that we can have that creep up. And we have so many more negative thoughts than positive ones that we really need to be intentional about arresting the thoughts that we have in our mind. And affirmations is absolutely one of the tools, rather, that can help us to do that.
Right. God, I've been listening to the 4 Agreements. I was actually listening to it in the car yesterday. It was a very quick listen if the listeners would like to check it out. But I had never thought about how many agreements I had made with myself, just like even in my childhood, about who I was, what I was capable of, the limits that I placed on myself that go all the way back to when I was a very young child. And in the mornings, usually if you're not an early riser, right, you're hopping out of bed, you're running late, you're saying negative things to your subconscious from the moment you jump out of bed late, to the time you hop in the shower, to the time you get in the car and get to, or barely get to where you're headed. And it's like, well, I haven't said anything affirming or nice, or honestly, the thoughts that I've had about myself, and I'm not just speaking in general, there's times when I've had thoughts about myself and said things to myself that I would not allow anybody else to say to me. Like, I might literally have a physical altercation if somebody said some of those things to me. And it's so easy to, well, I guess it's not that easy, right? Because if it was easy, we'd all be doing it. But just that quick little change in the morning, like you said, that quick hack in the morning could begin to make all the difference, even in the way that you show up and affirm other people, right? Because if you start those good things about yourself, it'll be easier to affirm others in your life. So I think when you talk about like doing good work and heading out in the world to help other people, it's important to do those things for yourself first thing in the morning. Now, can you share some key insights and lessons learned as you've gone through the journey, turned this into a movement, a profession for others that might be aspiring to do the same?
So if your desire is to heal from a fractured father relationship, the one thing that I would say to do is to get clear on what story you actually have in your mind about why he left, or why he didn't stay, or why the relationship didn't work out, or whatever it is. What I have come to understand with clients, with myself, is that there's a number of different stories that we have in our mind about this particular situation. The one that we tell ourselves that we typically don't share with anyone else is the one that informs our decisions and is the lens through which we see ourselves in the world. And so when we understand what that story is, we can start to understand what the root cause of some of our behaviors has been. So, for instance, if the story that you are telling yourself is that your father has not been in your life because of something you did when you were younger, then you're always going to be trying to prove that you are a good girl, that you deserve to be in spaces that you deserve to belong, and all of that. And what that can look like practically is you shape-shifting or having a palatable persona that you put on to go into spaces because you want to make sure that whatever version of yourself that you're presenting to the world is going to be acceptable and that you are going to belong to the space that you want to be in. So that's the first thing that I would say. The second thing is I would start to ask myself from some very real questions about the relationships that I have. How do I feel in these relationships? Do I feel most like myself in these relationships? Is my body at rest and at peace when I'm around these people? And if your answer is no to any of these things, you need to now examine, why am I staying here? Because if you're unable to answer that question, or if the answer is because I don't want to be abandoned again, or I don't want to have anyone else leave, or whatever it is, then that's when I would say that there's definitely deeper work that needs to be done. It could be done with a coach like me. It could be done with a therapist, but you want to start examining some of the decisions that you've made and start to excavate some of these thoughts that have led to the behaviors that are consistent for you. Because a lot of what our brain will do is to record what is the most common response that we have to any kind of stimuli or situation, and it will continue to run that track every single time you're in the same situation. So this can look like, even though you want to be in a relationship with someone who you feel feel seen and heard and loved and supported by. If you always choose someone who is similar to maybe the emotional unavailability that your father displays, then your brain is automatically always going to take you to what has been familiar to you, even though you desire change. And so you are going to have to do something to break up this brain pathway that you're already on. We like to call them habit loops. You need to do something to break that up. And asking yourself pointed questions about how the experiences that you're having, especially the ones that you keep having over and over again, how they're really making you feel, and deciding in your mind that I no longer want to have this experience and I no longer want to feel this way. And so now, brain, let's start to think about what are the different things that we can do to start having new experiences. Now you are unlocking something in your mind and you're breaking up the neural pathways that want to go in the direction that it's always gone, to say, well, she wants to start experiencing something new. She wants to start having a different kind of experience. Let's start to look at the things that are not similar to what we have always done. And now you can start to see things that you may have ignored before. So that's one of the things that I would say to do. But certainly it would be to honestly start getting curious with yourself about what you're experiencing, whether or not it's what you want to do. And if not, what are you willing to do in order to see the change that you want to see?
Now, I was going to ask you what advice you would give entrepreneurs wanting to pursue their passions. It sounds like a lot of what you are suggesting that we do to heal some of these fatherless, these wounds from our relationships with our father, can be directly applied to pursuing your passion and going into entrepreneurship. As you were speaking, I'm like, well, I need to be doing that just in my day-to-day with everything in my life, right? Like that's so relevant to everything that we do.
It is. But even in answer to that question with entrepreneurs, I honestly ask them, what is it that you could see yourself doing that you wouldn't need to get money for? That's the first thing. Because I feel like once we understand like what brings us joy, and not only what brings us joy, but also where are our skills best used? Because I think that the marrying of those two things is where we could really start to do some good work. If you know that you're a great teacher, you like sharing information, but then you also feel passionate about poetry or something like that, you could quite easily start doing something like a poetry writing class, creative writing class, things of that nature. So there's so many different ways to marry what you're good at naturally with what you would do without having to be paid, to find something that is going to bring you joy and also going to feed you financially.
I think that's the hardest thing for me to overcome, right? It was like the very logical and I was raised to be very practical, right? Yeah. You make practical decisions and choices when it came to education, career, etc. But there were these things that I was passionate about, and I couldn't quite figure out how to make those passions profitable. Mm-hmm. And so I felt like I had to live in two different places. Like there's the side where I was stoking my passions, and then there was like, oh, this is the side that you need to do so you can eat every day and pay your bills. And I think that is truly the key, is finding those places where you can marry the two. And then sometimes getting comfortable with the fact that sometimes what you're passionate about and what is truly your purpose doesn't necessarily have to equate directly to how much money you make.
Mm-hmm. Right? Absolutely.
Pursue the passion first, let the purpose come, and then figure out how you can then monetize it. Because if you focus on the money, the passions aren't going to make sense. At least that was the case for me, and I'm sure other entrepreneurs as well. So that's some key advice. Absolutely. Yeah. Now, how do you stay motivated personally and inspired to keep pushing forward? Because we have tough times, and to get through those tough times, how do you motivate yourself to keep going?
I try to remember what I have done before and what I'm capable of and the impact that I want to have. Because I have moments all the time where I feel like the work is getting hard, or it's not producing the fruit that I would like it to produce. And sometimes I'm just like, maybe I need to think about pivoting. And what I have tried to remind myself is that, first of all, God is the one who told me that this is what I needed to do. And so I just remind myself that if this is the work that He is telling me that I need, to not be married to the way in which I'm going to do it, only that this is purpose work. And so when I started to detach myself from the fact that the Lord telling me that I need to start to share how fatherlessness can actually affect your personal relationships with other people, I thought that it needed to be done in a specific way. And so when it wasn't working in the way that I thought it needed to be done, I was starting to get discouraged. But my own mentor told me that what you need to do is to be married to the purpose and not the way in which you get there. And so it was that honestly released me from thinking that it had to be one specific way. And so now what I try to do is to be flexible in the way in which I am going to disseminate my information or share or whatever it is, and just allow for the Lord to really just order my steps. But the other thing that I will say practically is that what I have had to do to motivate myself a lot of times is to just celebrate the things that I've been doing, because I have a tendency to lock in on a particular goal that I want to achieve the goal and then move straight on full speed to what is this new goal that I want to do, without pausing to say, wow, like, you really did this. You wrote 2 books. I didn't celebrate myself over that. I wrote the book and I was like, I don't need to move on to whatever it is this next thing that I'm doing is. And it's like, if I only stop and celebrate myself for the things that I'm doing and actually say, wow, this is a really great accomplishment. What you're doing right now, the work that you're doing, the people who are finally starting to come out of the woodwork to tell you that they've been here all along and they've been watching and listening and they've been getting the information and all of that stuff. That's something that you should celebrate in some way, however it is, but you need to acknowledge what you're doing. And I think a lot of times, because I wasn't acknowledging what I was doing, I was starting to get burned out and I didn't even realize that that's what was happening. And so the one thing that I would say for me that has been most motivating is to start to write down exactly what I have done, how it made me feel in the moment, and how I'm going to celebrate. And then when I actually do accomplish the thing that I said that I wanted to do, celebrate in a way that I planned out to celebrate before I even started. So that's been very helpful. It's been helping me to celebrate myself and really just to give myself the care that I would someone else. Mm-hmm. That's something that has been kind of hard for me because of my background. I'm usually pouring into other people, but I don't really stop to do that for myself. And so this is one of the ways that I have tried to be intentional and to keep me motivated, especially during days where it doesn't seem as if things are working out the way I would love them to.
Yeah. Do you ever find it hard to publicly celebrate your accomplishments and achievements?
Sometimes, yes. I'm not gonna lie. I will definitely say that I've done something, but I don't typically boast about a lot of things. I just will silently bring something out that I've been working on for a long time and whatnot. For instance, now I'm back in school and whatnot. You probably are not even going to really know that I was in school until you see me with my PhD robe on. You're not. I'm just not going to do any of that. It's just, I'm just going to pop out with a photo on. Yes, this is what I've been doing all this time, and that's it. And so it is kind of hard sometimes. And I think it also depends on what it is, because if I planned it, if I've been telling people that I'm writing a book, I'm doing a book launch or something like that, that's one thing. That's a celebration to me. But other times I just honestly, I might tell my friends, they may know what's going on. And then when I'm offering something, then it's like, that's how you'll know. But I guess it depends on my mood. I think that's the real answer. It really just depends on my mood.
I just find that myself included, it's really hard to, you have one set of people who is like, they're okay about, they'll brag about the type of toothpaste they used this morning. And then others who will just, like you said, they're secret agents. They'll do all these wonderful things and you'll rarely hear about most of those accomplishments or most of the things that they've done. What would you say, if you can recall one rewarding experience? I'm sure you've had many, but if you could point to one most rewarding experience you've had since getting into the work of helping other Fatherless Daughters Heal?
I think it has to be after the first talk that I did. My first talk was a TEDx talk. And after that, I got a lot of people who came up to me to share that they too are fatherless daughters, but that they did not realize that how they had been showing up all this time was a result of the fractured father relationship. And I feel like the response that I got to this first talk kind of solidified the fact that this work needed to continue. And it felt really good to be in a space where there were so many other people who experienced what I did, who were almost moved to tears. Some of them told me about my story because they had never had anyone be able to give voice to how they had been feeling all this time. And so having people come up to me and say that was really a humbling experience. But I think what it did was to show me what the Lord had been trying to nudge me to see all this time, which was that there are people out there who I have already assigned to this purpose that I have given you. And I only need for you to be obedient and do what I've asked you to do so that they can find you. And so because of that first talk and the response that I got afterward, I was like, wow, like this really is something that needs to continue to be heralded, because there's so many people who are affected by this who feel like there isn't a space for them to share. There isn't anyone who would understand, and there is no one who is going to be able to help me through this. And that just simply isn't true.
Absolutely. Now, how do you measure success?
Personally, I measure success by whether or not I'm able to complete the goal that I set for myself. But as it relates to other people and the work that I'm doing, I measure success by self-awareness. So if I'm speaking to a person about something that has happened to them and they come into new awareness around maybe something that has happened in their past that may have been the genesis of this behavior that we're trying to work on now, that to me is success. I think a lot of people are walking around with very little self-awareness around what they have experienced and how that has shaped their worldview as well as their personal view. And it has always been the work that I have been doing to really bring somebody into full awareness and full view of who they are, how the experiences that they have had has shaped them, and especially what has been the mind shift that they have made because of these particular experiences. Because a lot of times the mind shift that they have made is something that they are not aware of, but that is what is actually causing the behavior that they want to change. So that's definitely how I would measure success. Self-awareness.
Awesome. Now, what advice would you give someone who is hesitant to take the first step in pursuing their passion? So both on the entrepreneur front, but then also on the side of individuals who want to heal their father traumas.
The one thing that I have been really focused on right now is to seek more joy. And I think that that is going to bring you to what your passions are if you don't feel ready to know or to activate or actualize your passion now. I think at the very least, you need to be in pursuit of what brings you joy. And I think that doing that is going to lead you to a new awakening about yourself that you haven't had before. Because it's just as simple as trying to find a hobby that you enjoy. Like a lot of us, if I ask 5 women now, oh, what's a hobby that brings you peace? They would be fumbling. It would be so hard to answer that question. And I'm saying this from someone who has personal experience with this. Somebody asked me this like 2-3 months ago. I was fumbling because I am so used to just going professionally that I do not take the time to think about, well, what actually makes me feel at peace? What brings me joy? And so I would say go on a bliss hunt. Try to find the thing that brings you joy. Actually take the idea that you have been sitting on for however many months or years and actually go and take a class and see if this is actually something you like. Right now you have the idea of what you think this may be, but try a class and see if this is something that you may be interested in. I know every one of us has a folder in our IG page that has all these different things that we want to try. Pluck one of those videos out that you have saved or one of those posts out and actually try doing it and see if this is actually something that you would like. And what I would say is honestly to be curious about it as if you were being scientific. So you write down a journal entry today, July 11th, I am going to try for the first time, let's say. You're going to go to the pottery class. You're going to come back and you're going to write a journal entry about how that was. Did I like the pottery class? Did it get under my nails too much, like too messy for me? Whatever it is, start writing these things down because you want to start getting super curious with yourself about the things that bring you joy and what is actually making you feel like yourself again, what's making you feel seen by yourself first. The kind of things that I would tell somebody that they need to start doing before even anything else. Even if healing is something that you don't know if you want to do, you feel like it may be too woo, or whatever it is, start trying to find your joy. That's the first thing, and get scientific with it, honestly. Not about really how this is. Start writing things down because that right there, that level of curiosity that you have with yourself with just play is going to trickle into other areas of your life. Now your brain is already starting to get into the idea of, now we're in our self-development and our self-curiosity bag. What else do I want to be curious about? What else do I want to know if I like and stuff like that? And just this curiosity that you start to have about yourself and what you like is going to then trickle into other things. Like, I really like this person that I'm in relationship with. Why is it that when I leave this encounters with this particular friend, I always feel drained? Now curiosity is going to start being like the way your brain is going to naturally be trained to things regarding yourself. And so once you start to have this, like when you start to train your brain in this way, you're going to automatically start moving into, now I want to be curious about why do I always feel this way when this particular situation happens? And then healing is going to start happening before you even know it, because you're starting to be curious about who you are, what you like, and what you enjoy.
Absolutely. And I'm going to have to make note of that. You said go on a bliss journey.
Yeah.
I tell people I'm on this passion pursuit, right? But I like that. I like bliss journey because it's like, what is bringing me joy? And again, I might be taking a nap or doing something simple.
Exactly.
We don't have to overcomplicate everything. And that's like what do you like to do? What are your hobbies? You like hobbies, running errands, pursuing all of these business things. And goodness, I don't know. And there's things that I've gotten away from, right? That, I used to like to samba dance and I used to spend a lot of time writing poetry. And it's like, make time for all of these things that you have to do and you don't create a space for the things that really bring you joy. So even if you can't pursue your passions at the moment, you'll introduce this happiness and this bliss into your life every day by just making deliberate time, like you said, being intentional about yourself and how you feel and pursuing that joy. And so I think that is probably the most valuable advice that I think anybody who is on a pursuit of passion can take. I'm gonna write that one down. I hope you don't mind if I hashtag that, use it. Awesome. What's next for you? What do you have in the works? How can people find you and how can we support you?
What's next is my nonprofit organization. So we started a nonprofit organization last year, and this year we have been working to get more eyes on it and to bring it into the awareness of people that we want to serve. And so we're doing a lot of that. There's definitely something that we are open to, and we want to have our first event. We were thinking that it was going to be this year, but it may be something that we might decide to do next year instead. I want to say, first and foremost, the way that you can support me is to the books that I have written, to follow our social media pages, Daughter Heal on Instagram, Bernadette and Jackson on Instagram. You can engage with everything that we do there. Our platforms are interconnected and they talk about how fatherlessness shows up in every aspect of our lives. So those are the two ways that you can support right now.
Awesome. And now, how can people work with you to heal, to enter into that kind of relationship with you?
So either we can do something one-on-one. I do VIP days, or I do relationship sessions with people, or you can join one of the programs that we're going to be rolling out through Daughter Heal within the next 6 months. And then there's also events that we do virtually, and there are going to be a few that we do in person that you can get, immediate results from in the next coming months.
Awesome. So thank you so much for coming and sharing your passions, your pursuits, and just so many gems with the listeners, however they engage with this content. Just so much information that I'm processing, right? And I may even hit your inbox up later
Of course.
to finish the thought processes that have begun.